So really researching the companies and the positions that you want, what they're looking for, trying to bridge the gap with experience and credentials, and then networking, reaching out to people who are in those areas, nurses who are already in that field. What did you do? How did you find this job? How do I get into your company? Um, who's hiring, or other nurses who are also looking in your same niche. Where are you applying? Because I could be applying there too. And what strategies are you using? But just networking itself is huge because that's the only way you're going to get noticed is just by somebody referring you or somebody getting you an in just because of supply and demand with remote jobs right now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Non-Traditional Nurse Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Erin. Thanks so much for joining us today, Erin.
Thanks for having me.
So, Erin's a nurse who works as a healthcare recruiter, and I'm super excited for our conversation today because we're going to get both sides of the story. We're going to talk about her transition from bedside nursing to healthcare recruiting, as well as some of her insights and recommendations in job hunting from that recruiter point of view. So, let's jump in. So, Erin, can you share some of your nursing background and what really drew you toward a role in healthcare recruiting?
So my background is I was a bedside nurse for about 5 years. I started in med surg, did cardiac tele, some stroke unit, and then progressive care, a little bit of long-term care as well. Developed some health issues related to prolonged standing when I was pregnant with my oldest son while working 12-hour shifts. And so I did go on light duty during the pregnancy, but then it continued to kind of cause issues. So I had to sort of get creative and find roles that were either not a lot of standing or sitting entirely. The last kind of bedside job I had was in a nursing home right at the start of COVID. So when I went on maternity leave, I decided not to go back just because I was concerned about whatever I was going to be bringing home to my family and my newborn. And then a friend who I'd worked with at that nursing home had been in HR and she had reached out and I said, I was kind of ready to go back to work. I said, what jobs do you have? And she kind of ran a couple things by me and she said, we're also hiring here for a recruiter role. Have you ever thought about recruiting? And actually I had worked in career services before I went to nursing school. It was for the ladders.com, which is like 100K plus jobs doing resume reviews. So I actually did have a little bit in my background in that experience. And she said the culture was great and you know how important culture is for a nurse. So I said
Absolutely.
I could be persuaded to at least interview. And then I interviewed. They were great. They talked about how much money you could make as far as if you were placing a lot of candidates, that it's commission based. You don't have to pick up a shift and, work an extra 12 hours. If you're working, if you're just making a couple of extra dials to some people, there's a lot more potential to make money versus on the bedside. And it was, a sitting job. So that also appealed to me as well. So kind of by accident, I took the job and I've been recruiting ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sometimes we have like no idea where our next thing takes us, and
Mhm.
just somebody mentioning something can change that whole trajectory. So, what obviously it was a huge change, but what was that transition like from going from the bedside to being a recruiter?
It was definitely different. I feel like nursing is very task driven. And actually, recruiting kind of is also. In nursing, you're charting every task. You're writing all these very detailed notes. You're charting that you've documented medication, you've changed a wound dressing, and in recruiting, you're charting every outreach, every dial, every email you've sent. We have applicant tracking systems that are kind of the same thing as an EMR. Everything you do, you're tracking. So you can actually keep tabs on your progress and how close you're getting to placing a candidate. Very similar to kind of like the little dopamine rush you get when you've like cleared off all your meds that you've given
Yeah.
for the morning shift. So I liked that. And also, I mean, it was a way easier transition than I expected. I figured I would be pretty good at it because I was good on the phone for my previous job in career services. I had pretty high commission there. Sure enough, it was like very easy for me to pick up the phone and just like call nurses, call medical assistants, talk about the job, weed people out pretty easily as well, just based on not even asking them specifics about their experience, but just like their general outlook and getting a feel for their energy, how they liked the job, their patient interactions. You can just get a vibe for how good someone is at their job just by how they describe their day to day. Like, tell me a typical
Yeah.
day. And just based on on their outlook and their perspective of how that day is going and all the things they were doing, you could tell if somebody's often going above and beyond. They're opening up the practice and then they're closing it at the end of the day. They're, working through lunch a lot, or if it's really hard to schedule a call because they're often working through their lunch or they're eating on the go. Not that that's a good thing, not that that's a healthy thing, but you could get a feel for somebody's work ethic and attitude and fit for the role that I was looking for. So I did pretty well, and last year I was the number one recruiter at my company.
Wow, incredible. Do you feel like from your bedside nursing experience, there are any like very specific skills that translated so well into recruiting? So I guess if a nurse was really talented at certain things, that might translate.
Yeah, so definitely urgency. If you have a job that's open, by the time a position has come to a staffing agency, it's probably been open for a couple of weeks already, and the clinic has tried searching on their own and has not had any luck. So by the time it comes to us, it's like we got to quick get some submissions in at least the first 48 hours just to show the client that you're serious and that you're capable in finding good candidates. So there's a lot of urgency there. And it's very much like, okay, someone's crashing. Let's grab the code cart kind of a feeling. Definitely a lower level than that, but the same sense of urgency. And then just a level of focus, being able to multitask all the different things you need to be doing and prioritizing, like the activities that are closest to the money, as we call it in recruiting. But prioritizing, basically, you have ABCs in nursing, and for recruiting, it's the activities that are closest to money are usually calling people. You have an interview to schedule, you have an offer to make. Anything else, above and beyond that, trainings and emails and that stuff can wait for the things that are most important. And just being kind of on top of things and not letting things slip through the cracks, attention to detail on what's on a person's resume. All of that is important in nursing as well as recruiting.
So we kind of talked offline about how you started in a traditional recruiting setting and then now you've moved into a more independent role. Can you kind of explain that and talk about the perks and challenges of that type of role?
Yeah, so I worked at a traditional staffing agency setting for 3 years. And I was doing very well. I enjoyed the job. But the healthcare industry is very strange right now, and staffing is a very strange thing. And I could feel there were less jobs coming to us to work on. So I was very worried about my ability to maintain the pace that I was at and being able to continue to close candidates just based on like the supply of jobs that we were getting to work on. So that was a concern. And then also I started just researching what independent recruiting looked like, what the commission structure looked like as an independent recruiter versus somebody within an agency. And the commission is much higher when you are solo, but you have to find your own business and your own clients when you're solo. So that, I sort of started researching it. I did open my own LLC last fall and still was working for my company and not really recruiting or anything at the same time, but just kind of researching what I needed to do. And then I found this company called Tima where you have your own LLC, but they support you on the back end as far as credentialing and providing positions that you can work on. Everybody within the company has their own LLC. So it's basically a company of entrepreneurs. And everybody's trying to help each other, get the business growing and keep things moving. So I liked that business model. They reached out to me. I'd already had the LLC started, so it was very easy for me to just pick things up. And the main challenge of all of that is I do not draw a salary. It is commission only. So ideal to have low fixed expenses. It's definitely a mindset shift. I'm working for free until I place somebody, and it's a big learning curve figuring out which clients are moving on candidates. I have I had a big pipeline of nurses that I could call at any point in my old job, and I had to basically leave that all behind. It's kind of start all over again. So it's a little bit of a ramp up period where I'm not making any money. So having some savings, having low fixed expenses, and then I did get temporary health insurance until I got married and was able to go into my spouse's insurance. So there was a lot of like logistical things behind the scenes. However, I kind of figured if I could place candidates as an employee, I can place candidates as my own business. It's just the same. It's just a different setting. So kind of had to just take a little leap of faith there. But the commission structure is quite different. So you're talking like a 6% commission on a 25,000 placement fee, say for like a nurse practitioner like you. I'd make like $1,600. In my current role, if I were to place someone like that, it's going from 6% to 25% or
Oh,
40%,
wow.
depending on the level you're at. So
Yeah.
up to $10,000, you're making almost half of that 25,000 placement fee. So if you're willing to kind of take a chance on yourself and kind of be frugal a little bit in the beginning before you get some momentum and some candidates started, it's worth it. It's just the margins are very small in a staffing agency. So if you can have that thing going for yourself and you can collect a larger percentage of the payouts, you can do very well in independent recruiting. And I definitely reached out to a lot of recruiters who are in this space and in this company just to see, could this really work? Because
Yeah.
it is scary because I had some bonuses, pretty large bonuses I had to leave behind from my old job that were, delayed a few months, a few quarters. So it was kind of like, okay, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So let's just bite the bullet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so way higher potential upside, but you definitely have to have a risk tolerance
You
for a
definitely have
little
to have a
bit
risk
there.
tolerance. Some people have
Yeah.
reached out to me about recruiting, and I was like, "Oh, my company's hiring, but are you open to being just 100% commission?" And they're like, "No, no, I have fixed expenses. I can't do that." So it's definitely for a special kind of person who's comfortable with that and confident in their abilities and skill sets.
Oh, yeah. And definitely, talking to people and seeing, what their path was to getting to where they were more comfortable and stable makes a lot of sense. But okay, so from a recruiter's perspective, have you seen a shift more recently in the kinds of like non-traditional roles that nurses are being hired for or looking for?
A little bit. I think there's kind of two big areas where there's more movement. One would be in tech and healthcare tech, looking for consultants that have nursing experience. I have not staffed for any of those roles, but I think that's going to continue to be a big thing with AI and more tech companies that are trying to make healthcare systems more efficient because we know how expensive things are. There'll be more nurses that are brought in that have experience, that bedside experience that can help. Like I said, I haven't recruited on those roles, but I think there's a big potential there down the road. The other side would be the insurance and the billing side of things. There's definitely a big push for telehealth and transition care managers or case management nurses who can reach out to patients and stay in touch to make sure they don't fall off the radar and then end up in the ER. So trying to follow up patients, making sure they're taking their medications, they're not, they're watching their salt intake, they're taking their blood pressures at home like they're supposed to, so that they don't have a huge expense and suddenly the patient that's on their insurance plan ends up in the ER next weekend. So there's a big push for that with maintenance of care, especially for people in rural areas. And I think that extends to telehealth too. So I think we'll see a lot of that, which will mean more remote roles for nurses. However, a lot of those companies, so I was just recruiting for one, they wanted experience. So that's
They
the
always want
catch
experience, don't
22.
they?
They want experience, but they don't want to give it to you. So, but there's so many
Yes.
great nurses who would be so good who are so good on the phone and so good at teaching things, and they've taught their whole career. They just don't have the experience. So it's like, could someone take a chance on them kind of a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and we know it's kind of a tough time right now for finding new roles, especially like finding these remote roles that everyone seems to want. Do you have any advice for nurses who want to stand out when applying for some of these roles outside of direct patient care?
I think the biggest thing is being strategic and not just sitting and applying to a bunch of jobs finally on a job board. You're just going to, you're going to just be like 99.9% of the population. So I think it starts with pinpointing exactly maybe two areas. So say you say, I want to find a remote job as a nurse. Pinpoint, I want specifically case management and utilization review, or say I want to specifically do telehealth and informatics, or just pick like two very niche areas. And then you can start to research and pinpoint 10 companies that have been hiring in those areas. Then you can actually go on those websites, look at the jobs they have open. What are they requiring in the job description? Then you know where the gap is and what you have on your resume and what you still need, whether it's maybe you pick up a PRN job doing audits on some charts a couple nights a week or something. Maybe you get a CE credit, maybe you get a certification. So starting to research so that you can bridge that gap. The other thing I recommend sometimes is taking what I call a transition position, which is maybe not your ideal job, but it's like a step in the right direction toward what you want. That's going to get you closer so that you have a little bit of that experience they're looking for. So really researching the companies and the positions that you want, what they're looking for, trying to bridge the gap with experience and credentials, and then networking, reaching out to people who are in those areas, nurses who are already in that field. What did you do? How did you find this job? How do I get into your company? Um, who's hiring, or other nurses who are also looking in your same niche. Where are you applying? Because I could be applying there too. And what strategies are you using? But just networking itself is huge, because that's the only way you're going to get noticed, is just by somebody referring you or somebody getting you an in, just because of supply and demand with remote jobs right now.
Absolutely. It makes all the difference to have an internal referral, and people are willing to do that for you. If you get them on the phone, you can show them that you're a good person with experience. Like, to get someone's stamp of approval means everything. And I know we've talked
Mhm.
about it, Erin, that there's some referral bonuses that are pretty amazing out there. So, like, it's
Yeah.
kind of a win-win for that person. If they can place a little bit of trust in you and give you that internal referral, you guys can both come out ahead. So,
Yeah. I think it just starts with having a strategy. I think that is
yeah.
so key, just to like start with the end in mind, reverse engineer it,
Yeah.
and treat it like a scavenger hunt. Treat it like an elaborate like that's how I approach recruiting actually too. It's like an elaborate scavenger hunt, and it just reverse engineer what you want. Keep it a very detailed spreadsheet of your target companies, all your points of contact, who you've talked to, any phone numbers you get. I mean, it sounds crazy. It sounds way over the top, but if you treat job searching like its own job, you will,
Yeah.
it's a numbers game. If you reach out to enough
Right.
people, you will hit on something eventually, but you can't just sit back and like hit the apply button.
Yes.
It just won't work.
And I love that you talk about, really narrowing it down before to fill that gap, because you see people do the opposite of getting certifications, degrees, all of these things without any set plan. And then it doesn't get you anywhere unless you really know what you're going to do with it and how to use it.
Yeah, and you don't wanna spend the money and time on something you
Yes,
actually don't need. Uh,
absolutely.
so but the great thing about nursing is for the most part, you don't have to go back to school. Most of these, like, I think it's like 300 plus jobs that are only
Yeah.
require a bachelor's degree. You just gotta get a little extra training in one area or another, set,
Yeah.
skill stack a little bit and go.
Absolutely. I took a job. I already had my NP, but I took a remote leadership job that I didn't need my NP in, just because it, fit my needs at that time. So, yeah, you never know what you're going to need, but yeah, you definitely don't always need that extra degree.
Mhm.
All right. And then this might be a little bit of what we just talked about, but what are like the most common mistakes you see when people are trying to pivot industries, or like they don't have that experience and trying to find a new role?
I think just not having a plan, not having a game plan, and not having a LinkedIn profile. I know I've talked
Yes.
about this to death everywhere, but if we can't find you, we don't know you exist. So make sure you have a footprint. Make sure you have, an Indeed account. Make sure you have a LinkedIn account, and just even if you're posting a little bit, or that you're open to. I know there's a lot of controversy about the open to work green circle, but I don't think it looks desperate as for healthcare. It's like you'll get so much outreach if you have that as someone in healthcare showing that you're open to work, because who knows, who will reach out to you at that point. So And then just everything we said before, but just like having a strategy overall for what you want to do, and being very flexible to what you will take just to kind of get you there, be
Yeah.
willing to take maybe a pay cut a little bit, or maybe like a crazy afternoon shift or night shift or something. Just like treat it as like a temporary situation to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah. And probably being open. I know when you put the open to work, you get tons of people reaching out to you, but even taking calls where it doesn't seem like that might be your ideal situation, like you said, as a recruiter, you're not just searching for one role. So if you talk with someone and find, hey, there's actually a better role I'm looking for that might fit you, like you got to take some of those calls when you're searching if you've got nothing. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of like when I have these initial conversations with candidates, there's a little bit of a guardrail up, what do you want? And then I say I'm a
yeah.
nurse, and they're like, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
But then if I describe, if I see what they're looking for, if this even makes sense at their stage of life, I'm not going to push it on them if they don't want it. But if it's sounding like this actually could be something that fits their stage of life, maybe something great they didn't even know existed in the first place. But it's just like being open to just hearing about what's out there is very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, looking back kind of on your career, what has it taught you about the flexibility or kind of redefining what success looks like as a nurse? Because I know we all felt differently when we were getting out of nursing school, where we were going to be in 10, 20 years. So, what does that look
Yeah.
like for you?
I think the lesson I've taken away from my nursing career is that things never work out the way you think they're going to work out, like ever. So just plan that as a mindset. Like we're just rolling with the punches here. We're just going with the flow. I thought I would work in peds. I thought when I was coming out of nursing school, I was going to take a peds job and do that for the rest of my life. I was living in Denver. I ended up getting a med surge job in Wyoming as my new grad job, which ended up showing to me that I really liked the geriatric population and I only wanted to work in adults after that. So I think the main thing is just being open to what's available and not shutting down opportunities right away. And then following your instincts and your curiosities, and just knowing if you continue to follow those, it'll take you where you're meant to be eventually. And if you've made the wrong decision, with the job you just took, you can always pivot. There's no really
Yes.
wrong way, but until you know and try it out, you'll never know. So you just have to kind of be open to trying new things. I'm like, sure, I'll live in Wyoming. It's like a 4-hour drive, and I'll have to get another apartment there and then commute where my husband is in Denver. But that's okay. And then it was a great learning experience. Like the teamwork on that unit for my first nursing job, I couldn't have asked for a better first nursing job. Same thing with like all my health issues. Had I not had the health issues that kind of forced me to move away from bedside, I never would have come back to the career services side and try to combine my knowledge from healthcare with my skill set in recruiting. And I think everything kind of works out the way it's supposed to. And so you just kind of have to, I don't know, trust the universe, trust in God or whatever
Yeah.
you believe in, that it's going to all work out, that you'll end up where you're supposed to be in the long run.
Yeah, be open to saying yes, like, even when it's scary. We've talked about this on other interviews too, and just yeah, give yourself some grace if it doesn't look exactly how you think it's gonna look, because it might turn out way better.
It feels so devastating in the moment because you've worked so hard
Yes.
for this one thing and you're really waiting for this. Man, I remember just like not getting jobs as a nursing school student, just being like, what am I going to do with my life? I kept
Yeah.
not getting not getting past the interviews. It was a
Mhm.
very different job market in 2013. So, but it all worked out. It's all good.
Yeah, now full circle, you're interviewing other people.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Erin, thanks so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you for having me. It was nice to talk to you on this format versus our usual conversations.
Yeah, and I feel like we got such a good behind the scenes look at recruiting and from a nursing perspective that you don't always see, and it's really so valuable. So, as always, thanks for tuning in to the Non Traditional Nurse podcast, and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss any interviews or career deep dives. And have a great day. Thanks again, Erin.
Yay. Thank you.